When I was 19, I got a cleaner job at a local library not too far from where I lived. This job was meant to be my night job, and I thought of it as something easy to do. I believed it was something I'd just get in and out of in a couple of hours, since my job mainly involved arranging books according to their categories, cleaning the floors and bathrooms, and doing a couple of other things that would put the library in good shape by the next morning. Unfortunately, I worked at this library for less than 3 weeks because of all the weird things I had experienced. I know many people don't believe in haunted houses, ghosts, or all those unbelievable stories, and I used to be one of those people, until working in the library exposed me to a harsh reality. It all started the first night I resumed working as a cleaner at that library. That night, it was around 11:30 p.m., and I was cleaning the library's children's section when I heard a loud crash from the adult section. I had my headphones plugged in and was listening to some music as per my ritual, but despite the loud music I was listening to, I still heard the loud crash. Believe me when I say that I was so startled because I knew I was the only one in the whole building, and no one could have come in after me because I locked the doors myself. After trying to wrap my head around the loud crash of books I heard, I tried to convince myself that maybe some books were not properly arranged and must have knocked other books off the shelf. So I walked back to the adult section and found a couple of books on the floor. That first day, I didn't read any meaning into what had happened and assumed the books might have just fallen off the shelf. But when it happened consecutively for 2 weeks straight, I knew that whatever was going on was far from ordinary. There was even a time I thought that one of the librarians might have been pranking me, but I wish that were the case. Imagine being in a tranquil building all by yourself late at night or early in the morning, and the next thing you hear is a loud crash of books when you know there's no one else in the building. It can drive you crazy. I've even lost count of the number of times I called out for someone, and each time I didn't get a response. Honestly, I thought I could ignore all those books falling off the shelf and do my job, but at one point, I lost it. I had to resign earlier than I wanted just to keep my sanity. When I told the librarian why I couldn't continue with the job, she made a snide remark about how the last cleaner resigned because of the same reason. She also mentioned something about an old librarian ghost myth who is believed to haunt that library, and that spooked me even more. I know it sounds stupid that ghosts are real, but that had to be the only explanation for all those books falling off different shelves every night. It's been years now. Sometimes I think about those nights occasionally. Do you believe in the supernatural? Well, whether you believe in it or not, the supernatural exists because if it didn't, I wouldn't be sharing this very disturbing story. A couple of years ago, before I went to college, I used to work with one of my buddies as a cleaner at the public library. It was a massive library with many sections, and since he was initially hired to do the cleaning job, sometimes he would pay me to help him out. I know this information isn't necessary, but I come from a toxic home where my parents are always shouting, abusive, and fighting. So I always looked forward to going out every night to help my buddy clean the library, and as well make some bucks from it. Being at the library every night was my only hope for peace and quiet. And sometimes, my buddy and I would spice things up by playing between our jobs. So there's an area of the library where we'd never been. It was a restricted section, and for almost 4 months of working there, we had never thought of going there until one night. That night, we'd finished cleaning around 1 a.m. My friend suggested that we do something fun, something we'd not done before. Without asking him what he wanted us to do, I already knew he wanted us to check out the restricted area of the library. Well, we did. It wasn't like the door was locked or anything. In fact, when we went into that room-like hall, we were a bit disappointed because the restricted area contained mostly old books. Books with brown backs, thread binds, and a few other things we didn't care about. We had barely spent 5 minutes there when my friend asked, "Do you hear something?" I did. It sounded like footsteps, almost like someone was in the room with us. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, or my friend was probably pulling off a stunt since he was the one who suggested we check out the restricted area. But when I saw the look on his face, I knew he was as confused as I was. The footsteps we heard sounded like they were coming from a shoe with heels, and it felt like whatever it was just kept walking all over the room. Also, around the same time we heard those footsteps, the air in the room suddenly became cold and very uncomfortable. This happened during the summer, so it was impossible for us to be feeling that cold all of a sudden. "Who's there?" my friend yelled. It was really weird because a part of us was expecting a response, and the other part knew we would be doomed if we got one. As unbelievable as this sounds, while we were still trying to logically explain what was happening, we literally saw pages of those old dusty books begin to flip open at a rapid pace, and they started falling off the table that they were stacked on. It was almost like someone was throwing them off that table. It felt like I was watching a horror movie, and for a second, I was in total shock and couldn't even move. Thankfully, my friend was smart enough to pull me with him as he ran out. We were pretty shaken and couldn't even tell anyone what we had experienced because we'd broken the rule and entered that restricted area. 2 days after our encounter with whatever was in that room, my friend called it quits. We still talk about that night to this day, and he gave me permission to share this story since it's been more than a decade since it happened. I never wanted to talk about this experience again, because the last time I told my close friend about it, she thought I was making things up and desperately seeking attention. But seeing how freely people can share their weird and unusual stories, I figured I could finally share mine without being judged. 2 years ago, I worked as a night shift cleaner at a library whose name I won't be disclosing. It's a very popular library in my town, and cleaning after people at the end of the day was a heck of a job. Sometimes, by the time I was done cleaning everywhere, I'd be so tired that I'd sleep off on one of the chairs. I'd only worked in that library for 2 months before I began to experience something very odd. The craziest thing is, I only experienced these odd things whenever I was asleep. The first night it happened, I had worked 2 jobs earlier that day, and cleaning the library was my last shift. So you can imagine how exhausted I was after all that cleaning. Because I was too tired to walk home, I decided to sit and rest on one of the chairs, then head home after resting a bit. But I fell asleep. Shortly after I fell asleep, I heard what sounded like the voices of 2 people talking and laughing in hushed tones. But when I opened my eyes to see if anyone was in there with me, everything was dead silent. For that first night, I dismissed it as hallucinations due to stress. But when it happened the second, it really began to give me the creeps. The second time I heard those voices, I fell asleep again after cleaning, except I wasn't as tired as the first night. That second time was even creepier, because I kept hearing a little girl giggle. It sounded like she was standing next to me and giggling close to my ears. Again, I woke up immediately, but no one was there with me. I was the only one in the library, as it should have been. After that night, I ensured I didn't hear anything weird or strange anymore. That's because I stopped sleeping after cleaning. The second time freaked me out so much, and I decided that no matter how tired I was after cleaning, I'd head straight home. I didn't want to wake up one morning and have strange people, or possibly ghosts, staring at me in the face. I still worked in that library for another 8 months before leaving for a better job, but never slept in the library again. Funnily enough, no one believed me when I told them what I had experienced, and they even caused me to doubt myself. But now that I know there are others like me who have experienced strange and unexplainable things, I'm 100% sure I experienced those things.